You ever been in a conversation, maybe online or with a friend, and they make a point that just kind of feels wrong? You know there's a hole in their argument, but for the life of you, you can't figure out exactly what it is. It's super frustrating, right? Well, that's all about to change. Today, we're building a tool that's going to help you pinpoint those logical flaws and explain exactly why they don't add up.
So, here's our plan. First up, we'll get a clear definition of what faulty logic even means. Then, we're going to look at 3 of the most common logic traps you see out there in the wild. And then, this is the best part, I'm going to give you a super simple but powerful tool, a master template, that you can use to call out these bad arguments. We'll even do some practice runs to see how it works. And finally, we'll wrap up with why this skill is just so incredibly important to have. A logical fallacy is a measurable structural failure. We can identify these collapses with the same precision used to find a crack in a building's foundation. This analysis starts with the most basic relationship in reasoning, the connection between a premise and its conclusion. We can map this relationship on a chalkboard. A single point, the premise, connects via an unbroken line to a second point, the conclusion. But when the conclusion demands more than the evidence can provide, the link abruptly fractures, the architecture fails. This snap occurs the moment the conclusion outpaces its evidence. The structural link is simply no longer there to support the claim. This lecture provides a methodology for identifying the exact coordinates where an argument structure breaks down. Treating an argument like a blueprint lets us determine if a conclusion's weight is actually supported by the premises beneath it. 3 specific structural faults account for the majority of these failures. First is unjustified extrapolation, leaping far beyond the evidence. Second is misidentification of vectors, falsely assigning a causal force. Third is artificial parameter restriction, forcing variables into binary boxes. Understanding these 3 fault lines allows you to dismantle flawed arguments by spotting the geometric error, regardless of the topic being debated. Overgeneralization occurs when a broad conclusion is drawn from unrepresentative evidence.
So here's the real problem. It's right there in the logic failure part. It's that huge, unjustified jump from a small sample to an entire population. It's when someone takes 1 or 2 personal experiences, a tiny little sample, and then uses them to make some sweeping statement about a whole group of people or things. It's a leap of faith, not logic.
These examples make it crystal clear, don't they? Getting 1 bad meal doesn't mean a restaurant is always terrible, and seeing 1 teenager driving poorly is definitely not evidence that all of them do. In both of these cases, a massive conclusion is being built on a tiny, super unstable piece of evidence.
The failure is found in the justification of the jump, not in the data point itself. To maintain structural integrity, the conclusion's scope must scale precisely to the scope of the premises. If the conclusion is wider than the sample, the architecture fails. False cause is the assumption that because 2 events happen in sequence, the first caused the second.
It's just because event B happens after event A, our brains are kind of wired to just assume A caused B. But man, that assumption can lead to some truly ridiculous conclusions. And these examples really show how absurd this fallacy can get. Obviously, washing your car doesn't control the weather, and a rooster's crow doesn't have some magical power to make the sun rise. The events happen one after the other, sure, but there's no causal link at all. It's just a coincidence.
This timeline shows event X followed by event Y. Our brains upgrade this sequence, drawing a heavy causal arrow from X to Y. But sequence is not force. We must downgrade that arrow to a passive dashed line of correlation. Often, a hidden variable is responsible, triggering events at different times. Without a clear vector of force, causation might be completely reversed or simply non-existent. Upgrading this relationship back to a causal arrow requires evidence of how X physically influences Y. False cause is the error of treating a passive timeline as an active force. Either-or thinking, or the false dilemma, presents a situation as having only 2 possible options.
This one can feel like a manipulation tactic, whether it's on purpose or not. It takes a really complex situation, one with a whole rainbow of possibilities, and just boils it down to 2 extreme options, usually black and white. It creates this false choice, basically trying to force you down one path by pretending no other paths even exist. So the logical failure here is all about what's missing. There are other valid options, other doors you could open, but they're being kept hidden from you.
By presenting only two choices, the person making the argument is creating a fake reality to try and push you toward the one they want. Now, here's a really high-pressure version of a false dilemma. You either get perfect grades or you're a total failure. I mean, this kind of thinking is so damaging because it paints the world in these two absurd extremes. It completely erases the huge, messy, wonderful gray area in between, which, let's be honest, is where all real learning and growth actually happen. And here's a much more casual version you've probably heard a million times. Well, we can either go to the movies or we can just sit at home and be bored. This statement just pretends that all the other options like, I don't know, playing a game, going for a walk, calling a friend, they just don't exist. It's designed to make the movies seem like the only possible escape from a terrible, boring night. So let's just do a quick side-by-side recap of our three faulty blueprints. We've got overgeneralization, which is that error of making a giant leap from a tiny sample. We've got false cause, the mistake of thinking that sequence equals causation. And we have either-or thinking, the trick of pretending only two choices exist when there are actually plenty more. Okay, so you can now spot these traps. That's a huge first step. But what do you actually do about it? How do you respond when you hear one? This is where we get to the core of it all. I'm about to give you a tool that will change how you approach these conversations forever. Yeah, this really is the big question, isn't it? How do you point out a flaw in someone's logic without sounding like a jerk or starting a massive fight? How can you be critical of the idea but not the person? Well, there's a way. And here it is, the master template. It looks simple, but it is so powerful. It's a three-part formula. First, you state the hidden assumption. In this argument, the speaker assumes. This part is crucial because it forces you to identify the shaky foundation the whole argument is built on. Then, you name the trap, which is an example of. Finally, you explain the problem. This is a logic failure because this simple structure takes you from just saying you're wrong to clearly explaining why the reasoning doesn't work. All right, theory's great, but let's put this tool into practice. We're going to go back to our three examples and run them through the master template. Let's see how it feels. Okay, remember the overgeneralization? Someone sees one teen speeding and decides all teens are reckless. Using our template, you could say, in this argument, the speaker assumes that the actions of one single teenager represent all teenagers. This is an example of overgeneralization. This is a logic failure because a sample size of one is way too small to make a credible claim about millions of people. See? It's calm, it's clear, it's analytical. Now for our car wash example and the false cause fallacy. Here's how the template sounds. In this argument, the speaker assumes that since the rain happened after the car wash must have caused the rain. This is an example of false cause. This is a logic failure because two events happening in sequence doesn't prove one caused the other. It's just a coincidence. Again, you're zeroing in on that flawed assumption. And finally, let's break down that either-or thinking. With the template, it becomes, in this argument, the speaker assumes that getting perfect grades and being a complete failure are the only two possible outcomes. This is an example of a false dilemma. This is a logic failure because it completely ignores the entire spectrum of possibilities and successes that lie between those two extremes. The template lets you reintroduce all the nuance that the fallacy tried to erase. So why does all this matter? Is this just about winning arguments or sounding smart? No, not at all. It's about something way bigger than that. It's about making our conversations better, more productive, and honestly, just more connected to reality. When you use a tool like this master template, you're not attacking a person, you're examining an argument's structure. You help everyone involved stay objective. It helps you shift a discussion from a heated fight to a team effort to find what's true. And you know what the real secret is? The more you practice spotting this stuff in other people's arguments, the less you'll do it in your own. You become a sharper thinker and a much more persuasive communicator. So, there you have it. You've got the tool, you've got the training. You're now equipped to not just feel when an argument is weak, but to actually diagnose the problem. So here's my challenge to you. Go out there and just listen. Listen to the ads you hear, the conversations around you, the news reports. Which of these fallacies are you going to spot first? I promise, once you start looking for them, you'll see them absolutely everywhere.